This podcast is part of the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and podcast services around the galaxy, as well as video on our YouTube channel. You can support Secret Friends Unite by becoming a Patreon member, get bonus programs and more over at patreon.com/secretfriendsunite. Join our Discord community for even more discussions on all things geek. For all the latest updates on Secret Friends Unite, make sure to follow us on Threads at secret.friends.unite and visit secretfriendsunite.com. Find our merchandise at TeePublic and Redbubble. Thanks for listening, and may the Force live long and prosper.
Hey there, Patreons. We're back again with the Spotlight. This is where, for our Patreons, we do have the opportunity to talk to great genre creators and different folks in the space. We are very honored, Todd and myself, to be joined by author John Jackson Miller this evening. How are you, sir?
Doing fine, doing fine.
Awesome. Very good. We were talking in the pre-roll. We're recording this in January of 2025. And we're all in a deep freeze because we strain across Todd's in Minnesota. Sounds like John's in Wisconsin and I'm in Michigan. Oh, but anyway, we'll try to have some hot chat and warm things up for ourselves tonight. But yeah, John, you have been in the world, in kind of the genre world since the early 90s, if I was reading correctly.
Yeah, I started professionally in the business on the sort of the other side of the camera. I was an editor of Comics Retailer, which was the trade magazine that went to all the comic shops starting in the fall of '93. So right when the industry started to collapse, it wasn't my fault, but
Right.
but I got to be there for about 7.5 years of downturn, and then it came back up. And as it was improving, I got the chance to do some moonlighting, and that led to me getting Crimson Dynamo at Marvel, which led to me getting Iron Man, which led to me getting Star
Right.
Wars, and everything else.
Woohoo. I love it. No, that was actually my first question. I guess I kind of soft shoed my way into that one because I was going to ask you a little bit about working at Marvel. Were you a Marvel or a DC person, or kind of across the board, or did you have a favorite character kind of when you were getting started? And was it Iron Man?
Yeah, I was definitely a Marvel zombie. My wife was the DC fan, so she brought all the
Oh,
DC books I didn't have to the marriage. And
marriage.
I think I mentioned this to the sales manager at DC in the '90s. To my you regret, I should never have said that I was a Marvel guy to begin with. But that's okay. It all works around and comes around. He's not,
Right.
yeah, it wasn't fatal to the situation. But yeah, the thing was, my first sort of grown up comic book was Star Wars #1, and that was Marvel in 1977. Collected Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I came a little bit later to Iron Man. My first issue was that Demon in the Bottle issue, which is
Oh,
Delaney.
classic. Wow.
Heck of an issue to come in on. And what happened is I had a cousin who had collected in the '60s and just didn't want any of the comics anymore, so gave me everything he had, and that happened to include Iron Man 1 and a bunch of other things. And I was like, well, okay, if I want to collect an entire series, then now is the time to do it, when I can still get my Tales of Suspense 39 for 100 hours.
Yeah.
And all of that. So, what happens is when I get the chance to pitch for Marvel, well, first thing I do is I pitch Crimson Dynamo, which is the Russian version of Iron Man. And since I had a Soviet studies degree I wasn't using, I said, okay, let's do that. And then I got to do Iron Man. And again, that was a case where, because I had read the whole thing, I was able to kind of position it in my own mind as, we're going to pretend that this is Tales of Suspense #101. We're gonna pretend that still in the era, even though it's set in the present day. We had the whole idea of my run was that I was getting Iron Man back into the Pentagon after 9/11, and it just made sense that I would riff on some of these previous appearances where, in the '60s, when he was very close to being Howard Hughes still, Tony Stark was, you would see Tony Stark in front of Congress all the time. And
Yeah.
so bringing him back into that sort of a situation, was fun, and it is in a sense, one of the forerunners to where you see Tony Stark in the movies and called in front of Congress.
Yeah, right. Yeah, totally. Awesome. Todd.
That's amazing. Well, I had the pleasure of meeting you at Twin Cities Con, and you actually signed a copy of your book for me. So that was very
Very good.
cool. And I'm glad it's coming full circle now. So having you on our show, this is fantastic.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Definitely enjoyed that show. That was we had actually the busiest single day of any of my shows, in part because we were right there with Timothy Zahn right next to us. It was
Nice.
That's amazing. I
we had
love that.
We had the Star Wars energy there, and then we also had the Batman novel, which nobody had really seen, except for people who got to the bookstore early.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it was great. Charlie had mentioned, hey, he's going to be at the show. I'm like, oh, I'll take a look, and I just happened like, oh, there we go.
Yeah,
Fantastic, worked out perfectly. So because a lot of your work is with licensed properties, there's a lot of established canon and things like that. So with that, how much of your time is spent on research? Do you get materials from the publisher specifically tied to the things you're going to be writing about, or how does that work?
It depends on what it is. You get the ground rules in advance. So, for example, when I did for Dynamite, I did Battlestar Galactica Counter-Strike, and that was the 40th anniversary series for Battlestar Galactica. And of course, that was easy in a sense that I had seen all the shows as they aired, including when the pilot was delayed. The ending of the pilot was delayed for an hour because the late President Carter had decided to sign the Camp David Accords in the middle of the Battlestar Galactica pilot. And so,
how could he? My goodness.
But it was a heck of a thing because that pilot was all about a peace accords between the Cylons and
right, and we saw how that worked out for
and again, if you're on the East Coast, you notice this. If you're on the West Coast, you didn't happen.
Right.
But it was sort of a collective memory of everybody who was watching that show. But I had seen all those shows. And it was made clear to me that not only did I need to not care about the sequel series, which didn't happen anyway in most people's minds, not only did I not need to care about that, but I wasn't bound to any of the other Galactica novels, including the ones Richard Hatch had done, or any of the other comic series that Dynamite had done. And so that was a case where, all right, I was able to actually just go in and work with the basic property because I was told that's what counted. Then there are cases where, particularly on the video game comics, where I don't have everything remotely, and usually there's a team of people who have databases that they allowed me into, and go in and take a look at things. There'll be cases where there's stuff I haven't seen yet because nobody's seen it yet. So when I wrote the Star Wars Canto Bight story that I did for episode 8, I was able to see what was going to be appearing on screen about this casino planet that we were writing about. And then of course we get into things like Star Trek. I'm working on the first Strange New Worlds novel before I've actually seen the first episode. And I do get to see parts of it as I'm going on, and again, these processes end up lasting so long that and that book ended up being delayed by the paper shortage, that I was able to actually go in and fill in stuff. But they will tell you what to draw on and what not to draw on and what to avoid and what to tie into. And then there's just some places where you can actually just do some fun things. My Star Trek Discovery novel called The Enterprise War, which is the first novel that takes place. That novel takes place during Discovery Season 1. So it's during the Klingon War. It's where Pike and Spock and the Enterprise were. And as I was writing that, and again, I hadn't seen the first episode yet with that Pike had appeared in. I said, of Discovery. Um, I'm going through, and I'm like, okay, there actually isn't an official engineer in this book. We don't meet the engineer of the Enterprise during season 2 of Discovery at all. And so that was like, okay, well, I get to create an engineer. And then what I did is I said, okay, you know what I'll do? I'm going to make references to all the other engineers that have been on Enterprise, whether they were in the comic books or the other novels or
I love
anything
it.
else. And yeah, they don't
Nice.
count, but it's there for fun, and
Right.
so and what it is, it's kind of continuity by Easter egg.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
love
man,
that.
oh man. Big deal. Well, it's funny you talk about Star Wars, you talk about Star Trek. I actually on our network do a show about each. I'm a co-host on the Star Wars podcast. I host the Star Trek podcast because that's my biggest passion. The thing in life that drives me most uniquely crazy is when people feel they have to compare them. Like, oh, I like Star Trek, but I can't like Star Wars. Ugh, don't get me started. But that being said, where do you lean?
Well, again,
How diplomatic.
well, no, it's obviously a different thing. Star Wars is space opera. It's a fantasy, whereas Star Trek is science fiction. So, yeah, if I want to write something that leans into science more, if I want to write something that leans into world history more, where I don't have to make up some alien that said this line in the past,
Yeah.
I can actually do something that riffs on this particular war or this particular revolution or this particular other thing, and I can get into it, and I don't have to make up a Star Wars version of Shakespeare or something like that.
Yeah.
But again, it can be fun to go the other way too, because my Star Wars novel, The Living Force, I was able to have a number of things happen in that story where I was able to just, gloss over some of the technological things, because that's not the point of the story. People want to know that you're at least aware that you can't get from one side of the galaxy to the other in 5 minutes, but they're not really in Star Wars. Yeah, gonna hold you to doing all the calculations for warp.
Right. Gotcha. Todd.
So we had a question from our Discord, and this is actually tied to video games. We've got a big Halo following, and the specific project about Halo with Atriox and that character. The question really became, with a licensed characters and what they've done with that specific character in the game. How did it? Were you given a lot of restrictions on what you could and couldn't do? Were there opportunities where you could add to the mythos and they were going to incorporate that going forward?
Okay, yeah, we were talking about video games a minute ago. This is an area where there's probably less mobility than anything, except for actually adapting a story. So I did the adaptation for Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull for graphic novels. There was nothing I could really do to add to that other than just sort of the voice of the narrator. Although I did fix a plot hole in the movie. But
I have to read that book now.
well, you'll blink and you'll miss it. But basically,
Okay.
I realized they never explained how Indiana Jones got his job back at the end of it, and I'm like, it's like, okay, let me just throw a line in there about that, and so that's the only thing. But when you're working on something where it's a video game that's in development still, and you've got multiple designers working on something and presenting feedback about things, and in particular, this was also a multiple hands project in that the Rise of Atriox series that we did at Dark Horse was an anthology by several different writers, of which I wrote two of the stories. And basically, they had said at the beginning, we want this particular story to take place, at this moment, and show Atriox and his ability to do X, and his ability to win people to his attention, or pay attention to him in this story here. And so I was able to come up with sort of the actual plot dynamic of where this adventure would take place and how it would happen. But the sort of the end point and the starting points had already been established for me, in terms of they knew that this character's biography would have these beats in them, and I just got to sort of illustrate what they were. And then dialogue is kind of where you get the most chance to improvise. Although even there, that was a challenge because we had these different species that are in Halo, and what the different species call one another, and it's not the same thing as what the players call these species. And so I ended up having to consult quite a lot on that sort of thing. That was the last thing I did for Halo. I enjoyed more this stuff that I did earlier for it. I did a story for Tales from Slipspace, and another short story for Fractures, where those were my own stories in a part of the setting where I wasn't going to collide with anything. And so those are much more mine.
Yeah.
Awesome. Did you watch any of the cutscenes of where Atriox was used? Like in the video game?
I don't even remember if they were available yet.
Okay.
It might not have been. I can't remember. It was some years ago. But depending on what it is, they will give you the resources that you need when they've got them and when they're relevant.
Excellent. I wanted to mention before I jump into this next question, my first comic was also a Marvel Star Wars. It was issue 65, 1982. Golroth Never Forgets. So
yes.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it that we're simpatico.
Yeah, that's the thing with the the caves that actually record information. That's and I remember I did a sort of a crystal cavern sort of a thing in a later issue, and I was like, oh, okay, I don't want people to think I'm riffing on this particular thing. And then I remember,
my goodness.
Then I remembered, oh, it was 30 years ago. So
right, yeah, nobody will remember, right?
Only Charlie knows that.
There's no proof. There's no proof.
Hey, Secret Friends Unite, let me tell you about Zencastr. We use them for our show, and now they're supporting us. Zencastr is now the all-in-one solution making podcasting easy. It's the ultimate web-based podcasting solution. Provides high-quality audio and video podcast production and hosting. With a full suite of professional tools, podcasters can seamlessly record, produce, and publish studio-quality content, all from one dashboard. Being a creator has never been easier. And we chose Zencastr because of the ease of use, high quality output, and it makes it super easy for our guests to come on. We had multiple solutions we tried before, and Zencastr has just been the best fit for us. Why Zencastr? It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencastr. Log in using your browser and start recording a high-quality podcast right away. Record studio-quality sounds and up to 4K video with your guests. Feel a sense of zen knowing Zencastr's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. Have you ever worried what you sound like? Zencastr's post-production process makes you sound buttery smooth. It automatically removes those ums and ahs in your recording. It removes those awkward pauses in conversation too. Set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with the click of a button. So if you're interested in making an easy, high-quality podcast just with the click of a browser button, go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code SFU1. You'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. Now back to the show.
Well, I'm thinking about, and again, I'm back in the Star Wars, Star Trek space. You've done some saga novels, like I've read your Prey, the Star Trek one, and then there's another one, Lost Tribe of the Sith from Star Wars, which I've admittedly have not read. How did genesis of a longer story arc? How do you gestate something like that? Where's that come from?
Well, in one case where it was Lost Tribe of the Sith, that was a case where they said, okay, we're going to do 8 short stories over the course of 3 years to promote the Fate of the Jedi novels, and you're going to write the whole backstory of this group, the Lost Tribe. and we won't give you anything other than here's the story Bible for how they got on this planet, and here's the stories that are going to take place 5,000 years in the future. And I was more or less free to, in the middle there, fill in the blanks. And in particular, I was able to make plot points out of some of the disjoints between the way that the Sith characters looked 5,000 years ago and then how they look in the novels that were coming out. And so I was able to get into stuff like, back when these characters supposedly crash landed, the Sith had no lightsabers, and the lightsabers that existed were the curling irons. They were the ones with the wires attached to them. All these things, at least at that point in the canon, or rather at that point in the EU, rather, that worked that way. And so anyway, that was something where it developed over a long period of time, and I would come at it every few months. Prey was a different animal because I, no pun intended, because I came out of my first novel, Takedown, and I was asked if I wanted to do another novel. I said no, but I'll do a trilogy because I have an idea for a sprawling, political thriller that will take place over 3 months in continuity time. And bring in all these different factions, and we'll riff on all of these different stories from the TV shows and the movies. Particularly we bring back Krug after a fashion, the commander from
Christopher Lloyd himself.
from Star Trek 3. And I went out and did the outline, and it's just the outline was an outline for 3 novels instead of 1. It was a long process, just getting to start writing. It was a terrifying process because I think I was on my 4th or 5th novel when I started it, and I had never done anything before where it's like, okay, this is going to end up being 1/3 of a million words, and I don't know how I'm gonna actually land this plane. I don't know what the beats are gonna look like. I don't know what ideas I'm gonna come up with in the middle that are gonna improve the whole thing. And as I got through it, I it's like, okay, yeah, novel 1, as I get through it and it takes shape and it feels like, okay, this is a novel about Klingon honor. And then the second novel is a novel about illusions, illusionists in the Star Trek frame, and what it means to be a magician in Star Trek. And then the third novel brings it all together. And by the time I got to the second half of the third novel, I was out of time. The joke was, Pray was Pray, pray that it'll be on time. I have a copy of it in German over here, and you can actually see it's 1,200 pages because they have a single edition. They have a single edition of it, and it's 1,200 pages. And I'm getting down to that last 150, 200 pages, and and I have 10 days to do it in, and that was the only time on working on a novel where I had to turn in chapters every day, so the book wouldn't crash. And miraculously, I found that they were the easiest chapters to write, and this has actually been borne out on every novel I've ever written, including the one I'm writing right now. Hopefully, it follows the same track, which is you end up doing, 1/3 of the work in the first 2/3 of the time, because it takes takes that long to actually figure out the characters, figure out the order of things, figure out what's going on. By the time I got to that second half of the third book in the trilogy, I knew where I wanted everybody to go. I knew what my ending chapters, and it ended up being one of those things, that long a series, there's like 9 epilogues. I mean, because you've got all these characters to send away. And we don't call them epilogues, but yeah, we got all these storylines to wrap up. But I knew where I was going, and yeah, we landed that thing, and but again, it was complicated, and because we released the books monthly, I had all three books on my desk at once, because I was finishing the third novel, at the same time I had a layer of proofreading on the second novel and a later version of proofreading on the first. Best thing about it is it means there are no mistakes in that trilogy at all, because I had it all on the table at once. I was able, nobody who's an only child in book 3 has a brother in book 1. I
Oh,
Well, that's the kind of stuff you got to care about, and
yeah, right.
what color somebody's hair is or something like that. I tend not to do a lot of description on my characters anyway, in a novel, just because I know I'm going to forget what people look like.
Oh boy. Wow, Todd.
So I've been reading your book, and I'm a slow reader. That's the worst part about it. But and that book is Batman Resurrection. That's it's one of your newest books out there, and it's a great premise. And Charlie and I were big fans of the Batman '89 comic that came out.
Oh, big time.
And so because of that, it makes me think of building out a universe that pretty much was very open to do more things with Batman. And that's Batman '89 and Between Batman Returns.
Yeah.
We don't know a lot what happened there. But how did that project happen? Was Warner Brothers DC looking for pitches?
Well, what happened there?
Was there already a call for it?
What happened there? It was just good fortune. The day that the day that Star Trek: Strange New Worlds came out, I was on the way to a release event in Madison, Wisconsin, in a snowstorm, and
Of course.
like you do, it was in February, but not January. And I got the offer to, after 10 years, write another Star Wars novel. And that became the novel about the Jedi Council, which is The Living Force, which came out in April. I was in the middle of writing The Living Force with my editor, Tom Holler, and he said, "You saw Batman 12 times in the theater, didn't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I did. And I kept the tickets. I kept the stubs."
Oh my gosh.
I'd written about it incessantly back when I was at Comics Buyer's Guide, and also at my college newspaper, which I wrote my first, I wrote 2 different reviews for it in 1989. And
I
in
did that kind of stuff too.
in fact, one of those reviews very specifically gets into questions that I had that I answered in this novel.
Awesome.
One of the columns I did in Comics Buyer's Guide for the 10th anniversary gets very, very detailed into my theory for how the Joker could have survived. And of course, these are things which I picked up when doing this, because he said, Tom said, we're going to be doing a novel series, at least 2 here that we're going to do right away with DC, with tying into the Tim Burton movies specifically. And of course, they'd had this moment because Keaton was back in The Flash, and Sam Hamm, the screenwriter, was doing with Joe Quinones the comics, Batman '89, over at DC. Their stuff was set after, sometime after Batman Returns. First of all, do you want to do it first? I was like, yeah, I screamed. And it was a thing of, it was, I talked about it when it was announced. I said that I can't call this a dream job because I never dreamt it was possible to actually do something tying into just this thing. It says something about entertainment and licensing and tie-ins that this evolved to be a possibility. And so when I went into the initial conversations with Tom and with the folks at Warner and DC, I said, okay, I want to avoid the later stuff entirely. I don't want to get in the way of it. There's a second series that Sam and Joe are doing, called Echoes, which I think is on the 5th issue right now. I don't want to be in the way of that. I'm going to hug the first movie. I want to be in between the two. I want to be in this territory where, what's the thing most people saw? It's the first movie. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm kind of gonna have a bit of a fun thought experiment. What if you had been able to have a novel come out in the fall of 1989 that already knew what happened in Batman Returns and
Mm-hmm.
synced up with it? And also synced
Yeah.
up a little bit with these comics that are also going to come out. Not possible at
Synergy.
all back then. That movie wasn't even written at
Right.
that
Oh
point.
yeah.
But hey, I think we did it. And I got to say, I've done a lot, obviously, in the tie-in sphere. It's the first superhero anything I've done since Iron Man 20 years earlier.
Oh wow.
Wow.
I can't recall this level of positive response on anything. And part of it is I'm hearing from fans that I never heard from before. So whereas my Star Wars and Star Trek followings have had years and years to build up, I'm getting
Yeah.
all the Batman people at once. But I mean,
a flood of Batman.
but it has been wonderful. And now that I'm actually getting rolling in the narrative on the second novel, because as I mentioned, it always takes some time. I just post on social media less than an hour ago. I said it is hard writing this character not to get caught up in Batman's energy, because he does not stop.
Yeah.
He does not give up. He is constantly fighting. He is constantly doing what he needs to do. He sleeps a lot, and we do see that plenty. But he very much when he's in action, you can just hit him with one thing after another, and he will keep on going because he's Batman.
He is the Energizer Bunny. My goodness.
That's
So
amazing.
we've talked a little bit about the Comic-Con circuit. You're very active on the circuit. I can really appreciate that. My wife and I ran a Star Trek fan club for about 5 years, and we did a lot of cons, so I know the con life in and out. Do you have in the time you've been doing it, like a favorite fan interaction, and maybe like a really cringy one, if you were to balance the two, that popped to mind?
A favorite one. I mean, I always whenever somebody would come to a convention cosplaying as one of my characters from the comics, that would be just
Nice.
that was wonderful, because they would go to so much trouble. I was a terrible costumer. I one time, my very first convention, I dressed up as the world's saddest Indiana Jones. People thought I was an armed accountant.
Oh,
It didn't
I've
work
got
at
that
all.
costume myself.
It didn't work at
Yeah.
all. But they were able to go to the trouble, and the fans in Memphis had wanted to actually get me in a costume, or design a costume for me based on one of my characters. And I thought the only way that I could get out of this was say, okay, you can do it, but it's got to be actual size. It's got to be completely accurate. And I suggested to them giving me the costume for Griff, who is my sort of alien con artist character, who's only about 3 feet tall. And I thought, okay, I'm good. I'm
Wow.
safe. I'm safe. I'm cool. There's not gonna be a problem. And then I get to the convention next year, and they bring me at the dinner before the convention. They bring me a giant Griff Muppet who is life size.
Oh God.
And so I ended
Oh,
up,
that's amazing.
and so I ended up walking around with him the whole convention. I ended up doing a reading in his voice with a puppeteer working him, and I ended up driving him back home in the child's seat of my car, in the back seat.
Oh my God.
Woman at the drive-through said, "That is the ugliest child I have ever seen." Because
Oh, thank you, ma'am. Much obliged.
It's a Star Wars alien, and I'm like, so, and yeah, I've still got him. He's slowly deteriorating. He scares my daughter whenever she sees him. But yeah, I
Scare the
mean,
kids on Halloween.
that's sort of what it is. Cringy. I don't really have any bad interactions. Just about once every show, you'll have somebody who thinks that you actually are doing something other than working at a Wendy's. They will they will come up and they will you ask you about a variety of things that have nothing to do with what we're in control of, and
Oh,
Oh boy.
I liken it to if you have a problem with this thing on screen or that thing wherever or whatever, it's like I want to say, this is like going into a McDonald's and complaining to an employee that there's Coke and not Pepsi. There is
Right.
absolutely nothing I can do to alter whatever this particular thing you're complaining about is. I don't know who to call.
Call the
and
hotline.
it's,
The hotline that all you authors have, right? Right back to the franchise owner.
well,
exactly.
Yeah.
You've got the magic phone.
and I understand what it is, because first of all, they want to talk, they want to vent, they want to have their say, and you might be
Yeah.
the only person who is even remotely connected to it, but I just try to I listen, and then I emphasize the remote connection, that I'm a
Very
freelancer at the end of the supply chain. I live on a frozen lake in Wisconsin. Okay, I'm about
right in the middle.
far from the water cooler in Burbank as you're gonna get.
That's awesome. All right, Todd.
So you've worked on a lot of amazing franchises, but do you have a dream franchise or character that you haven't been able to touch on yet that's on your wish list? I know we talked about Batman being on your not dream list because you never thought it would happen, but is there anything like it's on my list?
I don't even know what to do on that one anymore, because like I said, this one was not something I would have pulled. I mean, I always used to answer this question with some obscure TV show, or just something that would probably never happen because 12 people would buy it. The Max Headroom show from the 80s or something like that.
Oh, of course.
Oh, there
Of
you go.
course.
Nobody's
Yeah.
gonna let me write anything about that. And
Small
yeah,
wonder.
although
Give me a small wonder book.
they keep talking about how they're going to bring it back, but it hasn't happened yet. So no, I will say that, yeah, I will note that Batman certainly has got me thinking about superheroes again, in a way that I have not in a long time. I wrote Iron Man basically as a Tom Clancy novel, and that's how they marketed me. I really was trying to do it as rooted in real life as I possibly could, and the whole MCU has come and not gone, but it has grown in the interim. That's how long it's been since I've written any of those characters. And for all that time, I really wasn't interested in doing superheroes again, because I didn't think I had anything to say about it. But again, I coming at it again with Batman and actually getting to think through how his world works. That is a hallmark of Batman Resurrection, and I think people will see it as well in Batman Revolution, which is the new novel which comes out this fall.
Nice.
Is that we have a Gotham City that we have seen with our own eyes, and we've seen people walking around in it on screen. And so, I can't just do a lot of things in it that don't feel like they fit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, some of the days that you might not have seen in a movie because, not enough happens. A movie is going to really hit the highlights of the Joker crisis, whereas I can use to my benefit the medium that I've got. I can use the novel form, and actually get into how his relationship with the press has evolved. Alexander Knox, with the cops, Commissioner Gordon, with the legal system, Harvey Dent. I can actually get into some of these things about how his equipment works. I don't do the full Tom Clancy of how everything works with the gas canisters and everything else, but I do try to think through some of the logistics about just how does he get around town? If something bad happens and your car is in the cave, what happens next? Well, that's the sort of thing that I think people enjoy seeing. The character have to work through these problems, and since I'm a mimic already in terms of how I write these character voices, the best thing I can hear is somebody saying, "Well, I heard this book in the characters' voices," and usually they'll supply their own versions of the other characters that I have in the book, and that's just as valid as anything I could do. But we all have our own people that we hear as these characters. So yeah, I mean it's I can't remember where we started with this. I am interested in sort of this realm again, and then I have like 9 of my own fiction and nonfiction projects. I've written millions of words. I own 1 book, so I need to get something out
Wow.
someday.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, this has been absolutely terrific. I always like to wrap it up by saying, you've touched on it, that you've got a sequel Batman novel coming out this fall. What else is on the slate for you? What else is in your head besides kind of what you described, or maybe that you're starting to put down that we could look forward to in the next, year or so?
Well, I've got this book coming out. I've got some convention dates and some places that I've never gotten anywhere near before, and so that's going to be kind of interesting. That's going to get announced as the year goes on. December and January is kind of when everybody figures their year out, and then I have some reprints coming out as well. The Batman trade paperback has taken a while to get scheduled because we keep selling the hardcover. So we're already at the 3rd printing.
Awesome.
So that's going to be
Wow.
out there somewhere. And then also I think it's in March, the giant Knights of the Old Republic omnibus
Fantastic.
it gets its reprint. And
fantastic.
we reprinted the first Epic collection last summer, but this will be the first new printing of the new book, or of the whole book, where it's 1,344 pages. Everything I ever did for Knights of the Old Republic, I wrote every page, including the text pages that that Dark Horse never included when they did their reprints, but Marvel did. And we've even got some of the production sketches in there, and then also Dustin Weaver. He did these wonderful sketches for the Knights of the Old Republic handbook, which again didn't get reprinted at Dark Horse, but that's in there in this gargantuan 7.5 pound tome.
Oh my!
And that is from Marvel in March. So get those.
I'm so happy that those Marvel books or those Dark Horse books are coming back.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. The just the regular omnibus goes for like $250. We've got one that is signed by me and all the creators. It's signed and numbered. Those have been going for about $350 these days. And
my gosh,
to have one for sale to people at $150 when it comes out, that'll be a great thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I've been looking for a copy of. I adore the Marvel Universe Handbook, the deluxe edition from the late 80s. Yeah. They printed that a couple of years ago. It's gone. It's going for $400 or $500 on the aftermarket. I'll never have it, but I have all my black and white, so I'm good with that. Well, John, this has been absolutely awesome. We're so grateful that you took some time to sit down and chat with us. Where do people find you out there in the socials?
Okay. John Jackson Miller on Facebook, Threads, and Instagram. I am JJM Faraway on the Bird site, whatever they're calling it these days. And then I am farawaypress.com on Blue Sky. And then people can find me on my personal fiction site where I have notes on everything. It's farawaypress.com. I also run comicron.com, which is the site that's got all the sales figures historically for comics. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
And that's where I'm going to be adding a lot more stuff. When I talk about the nonfiction stuff I've got coming up, that's going to be cooked out of that in various ways. And then that has its own Twitter, Facebook, Blue Sky, and even a Patreon for that. So that's Comicron. So that's the list. Anyway, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Good deal. You bet, absolutely. And if you're listening on our Patreon, thanks for being a Patreon. If you're listening on our network feed in the future, you can always visit patreon.com/Secret Friends Unite. Try us out for 7 days. Listen to great interviews like this one, and then stay on board for as little as $2 a month. So again, John, thank you so much.
Sure
thing.
Thank you.
We'll see you out there.
This podcast is part of the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and podcast services around the galaxy, as well as video on our YouTube channel. You can support Secret Friends Unite by becoming a Patreon member, get bonus programs and more over at patreon.com/secretfriendsunite. Join our Discord community for even more discussions on all things geek. For all the latest updates on Secret Friends Unite, make sure to follow us on Threads at secret.friends.unite and visit secretfriendsunite.com. Find our merchandise at TeePublic and Redbubble. Thanks for listening, and may the Force live long and prosper.